Welcome to Black Businesses Matter, a podcast about why Black businesses matter and the benefits of collaborating and advocating for Black businesses to drive impact. Each episode will cover legacy, hope, Black joy, funding sources, cultural shifts, equality, and so much more. We will provide inspiration and action while spreading some joy to a thriving community of Black business owners and leading thought leaders.
I am Larvetta Lofton, your host and the founder of the L3 Agency.
Known as the brand maven who transforms organizations with her storytelling prowess, meet Larvetta L. Lofton, host of Black Businesses Matter, a podcast about why Black businesses matter and the benefits of collaborating and advocating for Black businesses to drive impact.
Hey y'all, happy Women's History Month. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. You know, the fact that I get to have amazing, dope women in the studio is just gives me so much energy, because when you have a day when you're not your best, they bring their A game, because that's just what Black women do. And I love it. It's like building a championship team, baby. When somebody's down, somebody coming in and catching those free throws and doing all the things. So I am excited about our next guest. This is new for us. And I say new, so I don't know that we have had a real estate and wills and trust and estate planning attorney on the show. And so this is a first for us. So clap your hands for that. And she's out of Chicago. So I'm super, super excited about that. You guys, this month, you just got to dial in. You got to put your phone, your device on repeat with some of these episodes, because I promise you, now that we have reached over 100 episodes, sometimes force yourself to go back and check out some of our previous episodes, because it's mind-boggling to me that here we are with D&I being questioned and taken away. But there is so much dopeness that are led by Black entrepreneurs and thought leaders and business leaders. I mean, just all over. A lot of times we do a lot out of Chicago. And so to just take that away, it's unfortunate, but that's okay, because we, as the actress said, we build in structures. And excuse me. So we are building this platform to be a structure for you to hear about all these amazing stories about entrepreneurs that you can connect with, that you can collaborate with, that you can see the impact that they are doing. This one is personal for me. All my episodes are personal, but this one is personal because I got a chance to meet Katrice, who is our next guest. Katrice Matthews. She is an experienced attorney who practices in litigation as well as in transactional matters. She is an expert in real estate law and in wills, trusts, and estates. She is a former prosecutor. Y'all know how the former prosecutors. I don't know about you all. I love legal shows, but I always love the prosecutors. They come in to win. I don't care what it is. And that is Katrice, and has owned her full service law firm since 2013. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
And so, guys, I want to tell y'all some backstory. So I met Katrice through a good friend of mine, Ella Britton Gibson, who told me about you were doing in January, which is your signature event that you do that I think is really amazing, Brunch and Bequest,
Yes.
that I went to in January. And it was just to kick off the year, to talk about estate planning, to be educated. It was, guys, it was so amazing. And I'm saying this personally. So whenever I go into the room, I show up not as the host of Black Businesses Matter. I show up as Larvetta Lofton.
I didn't know.
I know. And that's because I want to soak it in just on my own. Yep. And then I just saw that what you had to offer that this audience could really appreciate, because we just hadn't seen it. I hadn't had a guest. And so when I haven't had a guest and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, yes, Katori, let's get her. And we got her. And so I'm excited. So before we dive into law, I always want to ask, who is Katrice? I know you got this little girl, and I'm sure she's probably like you as a little girl, but who was Katrice as a little girl?
As a little girl, I was like a pretty even mix of tomboy and beauty queen pageant.
Oh, wow.
I did pageants. Okay. I was a child model. I was in the log cabin syrup commercials. And I did all that kind of little stuff, Colombo yogurt and all that. Okay. But my mom would get upset with me because after school, I'm running around getting scars and scabs on my knees and my elbows, scratches on my face. That's funny. I really didn't care about that. It was fun to do, but I wasn't concerned about like the appearance piece of it. So that was always the conflict. Aside from the things that I did in that way, I was also one, my mom would say, who fought for the underdog. And I think that translates into what I do now and why I wanted to be a lawyer. I've known I wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was a little girl. I always had a fierce sense of justice and wanting to try to right wrongs. If it was someone who was being bullied or ignored, I kind of would take it up as my personal charge. Often the smallest person in the room, still am in many respects. Yeah. But that's me in a nutshell.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I love that. And I think we're learning like this idea of like this difference, the difference in who we are can matter in the world, right? In our own difference. Like it's not cookie cutter from that. And I think that speaks volume because I'm sure for many of us, right, we have this, hey, I want to be this, right? I want to do this. But I like that it was like the tomboy and the beauty queen so that we can, one of the things I've been talking about a lot and I've been repeating that kind of getting rid of the word but and using the word and because I think we have but limits us and just expands our territory and where we can go, right? Because while I did your bio, you're a wife, you're a mother, you're a girlfriend. And I think this idea that we feel like we're just these things, but she's this too, right? It's not but, and she's that.
I like that. I like that
and
a lot.
Showing up. And I think as women, because we are honoring women history, I do think that when we go back into history and we go back to civil, they were the ands. It was never but she went out here. No, she was cleaning the houses and she was protesting, And so that's that. She was taking care of the kids and she was on the phone telling the husband, okay, well, the food's left on the, So it's just this idea that we have, and these roles, society, America kind of sets us up to be able to be that. And I think that's why, because I've said, right, we're the largest segment, of Black women in entrepreneurship, because this idea that, and Oprah said it best, and it's one of my favorite quotes, you can have it all, but not all at once. And I believe that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can, just not all at once.
I agree.
And that's because I do think it's timing, right? It's timing. And so we recognize that it's not everything that is supposed to happen is supposed to happen when it's supposed to happen, Yeah. And so recognizing that that's the most important thing. So, now that, right, 2013, you started your practice. Now, did you work in corporate first?
I worked in the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
So that's where I did my prosecutorial work. So I worked under Lisa Madigan's administration. Okay. That was what I did first fresh out of law school. Okay. I did that for 2 years, and then I went into, my goal was always I wanted to have my own practice. That was just always my dream.
Was that something you saw growing up?
No. No, other than like Maxine off of Living Single. I don't even think Maxine! Yeah. Maxine! I don't even know. I know she was a prosecutor, but I love that.
She did have her own business.
Yeah, and I remember she ran for office.
Yes.
Yes.
So you are ushering Maxine back into the fold.
Yeah, she is a prototype.
Catrice, we have a Catrice though, not Maxine, but Catrice. But the persona comes from Maxine. I like that. I like that.
But no, I don't come from a family of anyone being in my family who's an attorney in law or anything like that.
And business owners?
No.
Wow.
No.
So, we tend to believe that most people, when they start their practice, right, it's harder for people to start business because they don't have an example in front of them. And so with you not having an example, did you, as you matriculate and kind of work, did you start to have these examples come into your way? Or did you just start to learn as you go?
It was a little bit of both. I had some mentors. Okay. But the mentors, as I recall back, none of them had their own practices. They were attorneys. No, when I was in law school, I did work at a firm. And he was a solo practitioner. He was a white male. He was very helpful. Okay. And I saw that there. But I guess I always had a very specific method in mind of how I wanted to serve people. What I did know and what I had learned from law school is that there was so much information and there was so much work to be done. And there really was a divide between the haves, the have-nots, the people who know and who don't know. And then it creates a gap to where if you're not in the know, you just forego your legal rights because you don't think you have access to asserting them. And for me, that was the thing. That was kind of my motivation. It's just like, it's not that hard. From where I sit, now that I'm on the other side of it, it's not that hard to achieve your legal goal or to make sure this X thing or X thing is right. But you need somebody who cares and somebody who understands you. Yeah. And so that's where I came in. That's why I said, well, I got to have my own thing because I don't see it out there. Yeah. And that was it. I used to I tried to coin the phrase when I had first started my practice. It was under my maiden name, which was Hall Legal Agency. And I was trying to coin people law. Wow. And that was what my hashtag kind of was with Hall Legal Agency was like specializing in people law. But I have to spend so much time explaining what that is. But it's really just appealing to the person.
Everyday people.
Yeah, everyday people. Just, because it's not that I can do everything or that I have an interest in doing everything.
Absolutely.
But there are some common touch points in each of our lives where you're going to have to encounter an attorney at some point. Yeah. Whether that's at death, at divorce, at buying a house. There are just some points. And who do you go to? Where do you go?
That's true.
They're not running ads for that too.
And I'll say this. I remember I was in a small business program and they said that we had, which I love to this very day, they said, you have to have your trusted advisors. You got to have a good attorney that you can just call on a whim. They said they listed. And if you don't have those readily available to you, it's going to cost you more later. And that was a good lesson because we tend to, right? We do a lot of DIY and I get it. As business owners, I can do it. I found it online and that's fine. But the example that they provided was that, right? Okay. But most, and they said this, attorneys, accountants, even mortgage brokers, when people go for bat, they want your story. Yeah, okay, Miss Johnson, but walk me through because I'm going to walk in here and you said your son or your daughter or this or what have you, and the story's not all making sense. So then I'm representing you, and it's, of course, you represent who your client is. Right. But if you're not giving and providing all of the information, I can't be your best representative.
That's it. I mean, and that's, you hit it, and you actually took me back to another of my whys. When I was in law school at the time, I said I was going to be a criminal attorney. Wow. I thought that I was going to prosecute, do that for a couple of years, and then flip and go into being defense. Because I was always, again, trying to be the advocate for the quote unquote underdog, the wrongfully accused. And I remember in law school, I was clerking or working under Richard Kling, who's he's a very well-known criminal attorney. Nice. And we went to 26 in California. And it was a guy who had gotten into an altercation, and he's telling us the story. We're in one of the meeting rooms. He's telling Professor Kling the story, and then he says, and woo, woo, woo. this happened. We were at the basketball court. This happened. And woo, woo, woo. He said this to me. And he's going like that. And then he tells a story. He goes back, and Professor Kling and I are sitting there trying to kind of put together his story. Mm-hmm. And so I was to take the notes. That was my job. And so then when we're discussing it, he's like, what is woo, woo, woo? What is that? And I said, well, you watch Jerry Seinfeld when they say yada, yada, yada? That's woo, woo, woo for Black people. Yes. And he's like, oh, he didn't know. He was like, is this some kind of code? What the heck? Wow. And that helped dawn on me exactly what you just mentioned. When you got somebody going to bat for you, and he's an excellent attorney, but there can be a disconnect if there is not some commonality there, some shared experiences there, or him to have someone to interpret and unfold. Yeah. And so that was a really pivotal moment for me, because it was just like, I want to be that for our people. Yeah. Because you get to talk about having a lawyer in the family. I used to always say that too. You've got a lawyer in the family now. You can't pick up the phone and call her. You don't have the same energy if you feel like you're bothering somebody or they're too busy for you. And so
it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing that honestly, we don't understand how much these trusted advisors are important with your story and your journey, right? And so knowing that, so tell me about Sable Law Group. Like, how did you come up with the name Sable?
So when I first started, like I said, it was my name, Hall Legal Agency. And for a brief moment, I got burnt out. I went to a large law firm, did that for like 2 years. And I said, no. So I came back into Hall Legal Agency. But I said, this time, I don't want to use my name.
Okay.
Because sometimes when I was dealing with people, if I wanted to say, well, I got to take it up the chain, talk to the bosses. I got to do this. But if my name at the time was Katrice Hall and it's Hall Legal Agency, there just was no distance. And people just think they can call you all the time and this and that. And I'm the front and end. So to do that, I said, I want something that stands apart. And so then my mom and I started to just kind of stew over names. And I said, I want something that's Black and rich. Something that's luxury.
Yes.
And she's like, well, like a sable mink coat, mink coat, right? And so I said, ooh, I like sable. And so that's where we landed on.
I love it.
And that's been the name. Ironically, somebody's been messaging me like Morris Chestnut just opened up a bourbon and it's called Sable.
Yes.
And there's some hotel downtown Chicago called Sable.
And I stayed there. It's really not.
Okay.
And here's the thing that I think.
I did it first, by the way.
You did. And we gonna give you all the kudos because you did do it first. And when I heard it, I was like, oh, I like Sable. And it made me think about furs. But I'm going to tell you, I love that you didn't use, that was the same way building an agency. Like a lot of agencies were people's names. And I, to your point, was like, I don't want people like, I'm representing Larvetta. Like, I just felt, to your point, like they're going to still want Larvetta, right? And so your name is in it. So I felt the same way that you felt. And I think when I think about Sable, even when you were sitting, I said, right? So if you think of Sable furs, that's what you protect people's assets like a fur. That's a real, like when I sat here, I was like, right? A fur is an asset.
That's a fact.
It is not something that you like, oh yeah, you putting that in your will. Right. And you listing who's going to get that because that fur is not just the jacket from Old Navy. Nothing against Old Navy though. But that fur is going to be something that can be passed on. And I think that when I was listening, I was like, that's what you do. Protect people's assets so that you can have that can be passed down. So, estate planning, right? So I do have to ask you this question because I do think that I think that people don't. What is estate planning?
Good question. Estate planning is writing down what happens to your stuff after you die.
And is that part of the will and the trust?
That's exactly right.
So I think that's the other thing. People, well, no, I got an estate planner, but does she do wills and trusts? I have heard that. I mean, I know that people they don't think that the estate planning is the process that the different, you did a great job, right? Is you can do a will, you can do a trust, you can have these things, but I don't think that we've been educated on that process.
Yep. That's true. And people say, well, I just have one kid. Or I just have my husband. Yeah. It's really obvious who's going to get my stuff. I don't need it. And that's the biggest, because it's just like your husband, your one kid won't be able to do nothing unless you have it written down in the form of an estate plan, a will, or a trust.
So, Katrice, I know I went to your event, so I know the answers, but we talking to the audience.
I'm here for it.
So I wrote it on let's just say I wrote something down in my journal. I wrote it. I put it up under my mattress.
Yes.
And I said, I'm going to leave, my glasses. I'm going to leave this. I'm going to do this all on this sheet of paper. And I am, selling somebody, all my stuff is under the mattress and, prepared for you. Does that hold in the court?
Not in Illinois.
Wow.
So, that's what we would call, perhaps that sounds like what they call a holographic will. Holographic will is fancy speak for a handwritten will that's not witnessed or notarized. And I'll take that back. Actually, it has to be witnessed in almost all states. But Illinois doesn't recognize holographic wills at all. Wow. Famously, Aretha Franklin had that written will in between her cushions. So it wasn't notarized, but it was witnessed. And there was some validity that was given to that. So it really is dependent upon state law. But you run the risk of misinterpretation, or you run the risk of that handwritten note in your journal being disregarded. So that's all the more reason. I'll say this too, and I'm probably getting there. So excuse me if I'm jumping the gun.
Go ahead.
But a will is the lowest form of an estate plan.
Wow. A will is the lowest. See, but I don't, and audience, I hope that you guys take this, because I really thought that the will was the top. Wow.
So that's why when people have a will, if you have a will, you're still going to be in probate court. It's not, it'll be a slightly simpler, and I can explain that if you like. But a trust is the creme de la creme of estate planning.
Wow.
It will ensure that your family will not be in probate court. It is dang near impenetrable. And I say dang near only because if there's some fraud element or duress or something that comes up. But otherwise, it is what you want, because there are so many different loopholes and openings that are apparent with a will, so that you don't. I tell people a will is a wish.
Wow, will is a wish.
Just from fundamental piece here between a will and a trust. When you draft a will, you're saying, I'm Mary Smith. When I die, I want all of my stuff to go to my son John. Right? That's a will. A trust is, I'm Mary Smith. I own all this stuff, and today I want to change the ownership of that stuff to the name of this entity that I'm calling the Mary Smith Trust. We then treat the Mary Smith Trust like a business. And the Mary Smith Trust has instructions that says, upon Mary Smith's death, pay it out straight to John. Don't pass go to collect $200, whatever. And so the difference being that with a will, we're saying what will happen after death. With the trust, we're doing that work now, so that after death, all I have to do is give the gift.
I think just eloquently describing that in layman's terms, because I do think that I am a firm believer that we don't take action because we're ignorant. I do believe that. And ignorance gets us in a world of trouble. And some could say, avoidance, but it's also ignorance, because you're avoiding the fact that you don't know. And so because of that, I don't have to, go there. And I think I remember someone telling me, these are myths. Girl, it's just you. You ain't got to worry about, girl, it's just you. You don't need to build no trust, girl. I mean, it's just you. And then as you get older, you like, as I got older with someone who didn't have kids, I said, but I got a couple coins in the I got a couple of things in the bank. I got a couple of things. And so, just making sure that it's left to somebody.
That's right. That's it.
Because we tell where, if you don't do anything, where does that stuff go?
Woo. Well, let's take Mary again.
Mm-hmm.
Mary has a house, got some money in the
Mm-hmm.
bank, a car, 401k.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say she dies and she has no will, no trust.
And no kids.
And no kids. Let's say she's not married. Let's start there. If she's not married and she dies, that's called intestate. When you die without a will or trust, an estate plan, it's dying intestate. If you die intestate, you're undoubtedly, your family's going to have to go to probate to get your assets, especially if your assets include a piece of real estate. If it's money and it's less than $100,000 in the state of Illinois, there's something called a small estate affidavit.
Yep.
You can complete that.
Familiar with that.
Yep. But let's say Mary's got some money, but she's got a house here. She's got another house up in Michigan. Okay. Then her family, in order to get title to those properties, they're going to have to go through probate court, petition to be the administrator of her estate. And then in that role as the administrator of the estate, they would have to then have a deed prepared, deeding it out of the estate or out of Mary's name to the heirs or whoever's going to be the one. Sounds simple enough, but when you file a petition in probate court, several things have to happen. One, you have to give notice to all heirs. So in Mary's case, no children, no spouse, then her heirs would be her parents, if they're still living, 50% to the parents and 50% to her siblings, right? You think that's no big deal, but then we'll say, let's complicate it. Mary's parents are deceased. So then that means 100% to her siblings, right? So let's say Mary had 4 siblings. Well, let's say 2 of them died. And let's say the 2 that died left spouses and kids. So now Mary's stuff technically has to go to her 2 siblings, her 2 sister-in-laws, the kids, and all of these folks, right? So let's say they don't agree, right? I have a case like that right now where there's something in probate and this and that, and they're trying to sell stuff off the assets, and it says, okay, well, we're selling the house for $300,000. The other one says, I'm not selling a penny under $500K. So now what are we doing? You've got to also pay lawyers to do this. In addition to dealing with that heir piece and all of the heirs that could potentially come up with it, when you file a probate case, it becomes public. And any creditors of Mary get to come before the court as well. They could say, and it could be as petty as Comcast, which I've seen a Comcast claim saying, so sorry for your loss, but Mary owed us about $400. Can we get that? Or Mary's student loan saying, hey, Mary did well. Hold on. Before y'all go diluting these houses and stuff, you got to pay us. And you have to go through all of that because it's a public proceeding. So everyone has the right to come. Right. So then you get into a whole thing. Now, that being said, there's nuances as to which claims have priority and this and that. But that's when you hear people talk about get an estate plan to avoid probate. A lot of times the follow-up question is, well, what's so bad about probate? How hard can it be?
Right.
That's the issue. There's so many uncertainties involved. And meanwhile, you're paying an attorney, money to go to court, to draft things, to deal with these heirs. Because it's fine if it's just your siblings, but it's when these folks pass away and you're dealing with their heirs. So,
that's deep.
Yeah, that's
I think just walking, I don't know. And I watch a lot of law and prosecutor shows, and you hear the stories of the civil suits, but just to walk you through that scenario. And of course, I've heard it gives me chills because it seems to me overwhelming. Like, I would be like, you know what? The hell?
Forget it.
Right. And that's what happens,
and
right?
That's what happens. And that's what, when we were talking before we started, is like why I tell clients it's the most selfless thing you can do, because having an estate plan, because this is really for your loved ones.
Yeah.
Because when it's their turn at bat, either they're going to do one or two things. You got 2 types of people in these situations. The ones that are going to hold it down, do the hard work, and make sure that the stuff that you left behind, the stuff that you worked your life for, is actually dispersed in a meaningful, intentional way. Yeah. Or you're gonna have people say, I'm not paying no lawyer for this. Let them sell their property for the taxes. I don't care.
Wow.
And can you imagine a house that you worked for, paid off the mortgage 30 years or paid it off up to 28 years and died in year 28, and your kids don't want to pay $5,000-$10,000 for a lawyer, and they're gonna let your whole $300,000 house go?
That's a whole thing. But I also wonder, and I'm curious, why estate planning for you? Because I find that and you certainly do real estate as well too, right? But I hear a lot of practices, we got family divorce attorneys. And even I know there's limited with that too. But you hear, but you don't hear, and maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't hear a person of color in the space of family planning law. Is that true?
It's rare.
Okay.
It's becoming more, legacy generation is being more of a hot topic in our community. So I'm seeing a lot more younger attorneys saying, hey, I want to practice in estate planning. And I'm really pleased to see that. But you're right. For me, it was appealing, I guess, for two main reasons. One, the potential to really maximize people's, I don't know, happiness is even the word, to like get results.
Yeah.
I'm someone who I like to, I started off doing a little criminal, like I said, when I worked at the state's attorney during law school. I did a little bit of family law when I started off, people fighting, fussing and cussing. I didn't want that so much. And I really wanted to help people, as hokey as it sounded. I wanted people to almost walk out of court happy that they were in court, happy that something happened that allowed them to go do the thing. Yeah. And so probate and estate planning really became it for me because there was a lack of education. I think to your point, because there's not a lot of Black practitioners in the space, it was a nice opening for me. And I like to demystify the law. I like to really take complex issues and break it all the way down. You do. I love that.
You do. And I think when you do the brunch, and it felt for me, and I'm sure it was intentional, it's like, what are the best conversations happen over the kitchen table? Right?
Yes.
The best.
Yes.
But I felt like we were at a kitchen table.
Yeah, I love that.
But I had an attorney, versus just somebody like, this is what I heard. Versus somebody's like, no, that's not what you heard. This is what it is. Yes. And so I think it's really this way of taking this, I think seems like a daunting discussion and make it, and I don't want to call it fun, but you do. You make it, because when you make it where people can chew on it, walk away and make you think, it's thought-provoking, where you walk away and you learn. I love learning.
Yes, I love it. I can tell we're the same in that way.
Yes. Okay. Like
new
it's
concepts.
It's just a beautiful feeling, and so knowing that. But then just having this, I could only see you as a prosecutor, but then having, you advocating and screaming loud. This is where I think, when we think about the Black woman being loud, this is where being loud is advantageous, right? And so we have to, so this idea of the, she's so loud. If you want an attorney, you want a loud one, because if you get one that's just
meek,
and if that's what works, that's what works. But you want somebody that's going to go and push the envelope. No,
that's right.
No,
that's right.
No, go back in there and try again. I think that's the other piece of it. Like, we have this label, right? In some regards, that I think could be our superpower, right? Because that superpower for me. Okay. Oh, well, she was a little loud. Okay. That works for me as an attorney. Okay. That's my attorney. Yep. That's her. Yep. That would be her. Because I think that when you think of prosecutors, right, that's what they are. They push the envelopes. Right. They do that. And you're like, oh, no, they didn't. Yeah, they did. And so recognizing, I think, and realizing that that's such an important element. So knowing that we have the wills, the trust, and it's part of estate planning, and understanding that when you think about law, right? I think about law and I think about Black, right? The first thing that comes to mind is that we have law to get us out of trouble. We don't have law to keep us protected.
That's true.
So we only see it from that standpoint. So how in your practice are you helping people to understand, I'm keeping you away from law. Because I do think that that's our stigma, right? It's that, right? We all got a cousin. We all got somebody that's kind of caught up with law for whatever reason. And some stuff, it may not even be their fault, right? They just were there at the wrong place at the wrong time.
You're listening to Black Businesses Matter, and we will continue our conversation in a second. But first, take a listen to this special message for our BBM fam.
We know how important it is to stay connected, so why not join our BBM Fam Club for special announcements and exclusive offers by texting BBM FAM to 312-300-1300. That's BBM FAM to 312-300-1300 today. Now let's get back to Black Businesses Matter.
When you think about these cases of being Black and being brown, and while driving, while working, while doing things, as an attorney who is a Black woman, how does that make you feel on that side?
When I hear those cases?
Yeah.
At one point, especially like when George Floyd happened and things were just going, it seemed like, things were going up in flames. I thought about switching to civil rights because that kind of spoke to my, conscious.
Yeah,
for sure. But then I had to remember that I've got to walk in my purpose. And for me, I said, well, I can protect Black legacy in a way that as these things happen, God forbid your loved one gets murdered by the police, but what's in place so that you're not only dealing with suing the police with your civil rights attorney, but now you're in probate court trying to get your dad's house because he was murdered by the police, but he didn't have a will. He didn't have a trust.
That's
because, for me, it's, I start off my events oftentimes by saying, raise your hand if you know someone who's passed away.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cheeky, but I want to drive home the point that what we're doing in our work is going to touch everyone in some way. Either you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're going to be in probate court. If you do, and you're going to be with a lawyer there. And if you do, you're going to be with a lawyer to get it done. If you want to get it done the right way. Either way, it's going to have a touchstone with an attorney. And so I see these things being very interconnected.
Yeah.
Because we as a people just need to become much more informed about how the world works.
Yeah.
Once you understand fundamentally how the world works, then you have a better understanding of the implications of trust and wills and why you need them.
Yeah.
And how, and because it only works, by the way, wills and trusts, if our system remains intact.
Yeah.
A contract, if you sign something and I sign something and we agree that I'm going to do this in exchange for something that you're going to give to me, it only works if we agree and maintain the sanctity of that.
Yep.
And so that's what trust and wills are about as well. But understanding how that works, because in the absence of it, how does anything happen with a house after grandma dies? And that's what I don't think people understand, the challenges. Like we were talking about, for some, it's easier once you've seen it with your own two eyes.
It is. It just is. Like, to be able to see it with your eyes makes it so easy and tangible to say that I want to do this. I don't care at what cost. I'm going to, this is what we're going to do. But we don't even, we've heard the life insurance, but we haven't really understood. And it took us a while for that. So then we have, this discussion, but I've also heard, and I love that you use the word legacy, because I've also heard the same thing, but we ain't really got a lot, so why we got to do it? I hear that. But I think we also have minimized our influence and power. That's the problem, because you actually do. Because if you didn't, right, why is it that you can go down to State Street? Somebody buying a house that somebody isn't in because they know that you don't know.
Right.
They know that you don't know.
Right.
And so that's how they get to win. So I do think that there's, and so when I sit back, I do have a question. So, online, there's a lot of will and trust companies. It's a company that you can go, I think it's like 79, 80. I don't know what it was, but it was intriguing. So I was like, oh, what is that? Is that could people start there?
Yeah. You can.
Okay.
You can.
It's for people who probably are young and right.
I would say, I don't know. I've never done it myself.
Okay.
But I understand they're there. I'm not knocking their hustle. What I will say is that it will be challenging for you to use those services unless someone is going to tell you what these documents mean. And not just what they mean in totality, but what does this clause mean? See, so when we draft something and we do an estate plan and you come into the office, it's going to be us going through and say, okay, now here it is. Now, do you have any questions? This is what this means. This is where this is. This is what this is saying here. And more importantly, taking a step back before we even get to that final time and drafting it, we're going to have conversations about, okay, what would you want to happen if this situation happened? You know, I have a client right now who has a child through IVF. So at first when she called me, she's like, I got a child. I said, okay, well, who's your child's father? She was like, he doesn't have a father. It was through IVF.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, and I'm estranged from my parents. And so I need something because I want my friends. One friend's in San Francisco, one friend's here. And I want to set it up. That's a customized thing to go online and try to do that. And with a hope and a prayer, hope that after you die, it's actually done right.
That's true.
That's the challenge. So I guess you're right in the sense, if you're younger, if you've got a very simple estate and you don't have any kind of unique circumstances, then perhaps doing one of those things. But one of my favorite sayings is, you get what you pay for.
That's right.
You do.
That's right, Katrice.
You know, and if I were a doctor saying I'm a heart surgeon, but I got a special where I can get you a heart for $250, $250, you don't want to pay that.
That's
no matter
right.
how cheap
That's
it
right.
is, because
That's
you
right.
know that is not commensurate with the work required to actually do the job.
Yeah, I agree.
So
agreed. I totally, and I'm glad that we're just being able to talk. I think it's one thing, Gus, that we have to get is that for Women's History Month, you know, let's look at things that preserves your history after you're gone. Because that's really what it is, right? Preserving the things that you have that are history, right? Because once I'm gone, I'm gone.
Yes.
I'm gone.
Yes.
Like there's no coming back, right? And so, but I can preserve that with some loved ones and leave that for them to be able to carry on. And I had to even think, like, we thought legacy meant children for years. Like legacy is children, when legacy is that piece that you have, that maybe it's that blazer you bought and it's a piece that someone made for you. That's it. But I don't think that we saw that as the same thing. We saw legacy as your children. That was the number one piece. And so realizing that, and you helped me to see that, no, it's that little piece of life that if you want to give it to your friend, give it to your friend. That's true. You know, but you don't, I never, to me, to synthesize that, I couldn't see that. It made me think, like, I got to really think about this, because I was only thinking cash and real estate. That's it. Yeah. Cash, real estate, a car, and that was it. Yep. But it was like, I know you got you a bag or two. Who you want to leave it to? That's right. You know, or maybe you got that, and so it made sense. But at the time, in my mind, when I'm gone, it's no value. But when you broke it down and you were like, okay, then just tell somebody, split it with the people next door. But it's realizing. And then the other piece that you brought up that I want to also share too is that building this doesn't mean you have to leave it for your family. And you said that you can leave it to a friend. You can leave it to a neighbor. Yes. I also thought that we had to leave it to our family. No. That's another, to me, that was the other thing that I didn't know, that it could be left to that neighbor or just a loved one, whomever. Yeah, no. And then, and here's the thing I'll say, if you don't have it written down, it will undoubtedly go to probably some family member. And if you don't have any near relatives, it can be going to some cousin down in Kentucky that you haven't spoken to in forever. Yeah. Because exactly what you said. Oh, you said something and I lost it, but it was the fact that we don't value the sentimental thing sometimes. That sentimental value is a real thing. And I've got one right now where a man passed away. He left lots of money, but he also left a house full of things. And so we are in this round robin between his 3 heirs, scheduling time for them to come to the house for a period of 90 minutes and
make note of the things you want. You got a pack of orange stickers. You got a pack of blue stickers. You got a pack of yellow stickers. Go put stickers on the things you want. We will look, and if there's some item that's got all 3 stickers on it, then we'll have to have a conversation. Otherwise, if you're the only one that wants this thing, take it. Cool. But those are sometimes the most contested issues are someone's family.
I could totally see that. Yeah. Totally. So it makes a lot of sense. But I just think in some of our Black families, right, we arguing over the TV. We arguing over who gonna host the repast. We arguing over all those things that sometimes I think I've never heard that story. I've only heard, they didn't have enough money to feed, And so I think having this conversation during this time, I think is so necessary. And the fact that, at Sable Law Group, they get to do this. So this is going to be our BBM brag moment. So it is our, what we call is our Black businesses brag moment that you get to brag about anything you have going on. And you can shout it out. Shout it out.
Ooh. Well, you mentioned the Brunch and Bequest event.
Yes.
That's where we met.
Yes.
That was in January. And up until this year, it was an annual event.
Okay.
But this year, we are deciding to make it a quarterly event.
Oh.
So, yes.
Okay. Oh, yes. That might be a goal for me to just come and sit again.
Yes.
So what's the date?
You're welcome. So the date has not been nailed down, but it will be in April.
It will be in April.
It will be in the month of April.
Okay. It'll be at your office?
It will be at our office.
It's a beautiful office, audience.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell you that office. You go thinking, you like, oh, this is just, and you go walk in there and you be like, oh my gosh, this place is gorgeous. It makes you feel happy, what you just said.
Yes,
yeah, it has a happy feeling.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to be doing that in April, and then again in the third quarter as well, and at the end of the year.
Oh,
but
nice.
That's a big one. Doing some other speaking engagements with some local organizations, with the local Links chapter.
Okay.
And but the Brunch and Bequest is our main one. Black History Month, I should say, this month. Oh, well, no.
But that's okay. Still say it, because I was going to ask you, do you still do your special? It doesn't matter, because here's the thing. The one thing that I tell people while we're this, it's still going to be taped for 2026.
Okay.
So it'll still be relevant with your year. Yes.
So we do specials in the month of Black History on our estate
I think
plan.
that is so beautiful.
Yeah. So, depending on what's going on, then we offer different discounts on our estate planning products.
So I'm going to say this. I don't know where you go for Black history, but if you've got a law firm that has specifically created offers during Black history, I think you need to pin them.
Thank you for saying that.
Because that's, for someone who's worked in marketing, most companies have put little to no money. They'll put advertising dollars, but they don't do offers. It's not a common thing. We do offers for Mother's Day. We do offers for St. Patrick's Day. Right. We do a lot, but we do not. Cinco de Mayo. We do not for Black. It is a thing. And I remember fighting for that for years. It's not only just, acknowledging us, but having offers for people so that when you get to the checkout line, right, you can, this particular company is offering this for Black History Month. It speaks volume, but that is not a common thing. So the fact that you're doing it as a professional service business is huge. So I'm saying that, guys, so if you want to put that, I'm going to say this. If you like to plan at the first of the year, that's me.
Yeah.
Whether that's doctor's appointments, this is that you can plan for the first of the month to check Sable Law Group. What's your website?
SableLawGroup.com.
SableLawGroup.com. You save that, and everybody have alarms, reminders. January 1st, you just put a reminder. Sable, put the website, Sable Law Group. In January, right, that you're going to reach out to them and say, what are your offers for February? That is so simple to give yourself kind of these, just from a vantage point, like, okay, we're in March. So I know starting in February, this is what I'm planning to do.
Yep.
And so we have to be more intentional with who we work with, but more important, how we do the things that we do. And I think that's important. for us to be able to do that. And I think this conversation and the conversations we've been having, and having done this podcast specifically to address the fact that there are, for the most part, there are Black businesses in almost every industry. Mm-hmm. And so we believe like, oh, and I'm saying this, that, oh, we just have chickens, chicken shacks. Mm-hmm. And I love the chicken shacks. We're not going to say there's anything wrong with Harold's Chicken for us in Chicago. Yep. But what did I say? Not a but an and, right? So we can have a chicken store, we can have an attorney's office, we can have an HR firm, we can have a pool house. Like we can have these things that I am a firm believer that diversity does not speak to just race. It can work in services and products. And so making sure that that's the thing, because one of the things that when I was listening to you, we don't have Marshall Fields anymore, but one of the things that Marshall Fields did for Black people, when Black people were in Marshall Fields, you knew they were somebody, right? Mm-hmm. So whether that's when you saw them, either my mother's like, oh, hey, and they were going to start a conversation, whether it's, where do you have your child in school? Yeah. It was just a conversation because you were somewhere where this isn't for everybody. Right.
It's exclusive.
It was exclusive, right? And so you walked in there, whether if you were looking at the shoes, the jewelry, the clothes, or downstairs for the offers, whatever that was, you were in a place. And I find that, we don't necessarily have that anymore. So we don't go into space to be able to ask who's your attorney or who's this. We're not in those spaces, Yeah. And so because of that, right, I remember my mother asking someone, I was trying to take a dance class. Lady was there, I have a Sammy diet. And that's how I got to a dance class. Because in her mind, right, she's thinking safety, right? She's thinking safety as a brown little girl. That's right. Right. And making sure that happens, but we don't have that space. And I think that when we think about, the service space, a lot of times, right, we need to see, who shared that, or, where did they come from? Referrals. And we love that. But I just think also we don't have that place anymore because we have online, which we love, right? But realizing that these kinds of education happened in those checkout lines. It happened in those dressing rooms. True. It happened in those spaces where you got information that was service-based information, And so when I'm listening to you, I'm like, is what we're missing. And we need this because it's important, especially now more than ever. And I do think about that often, like when we're in grocery stores, we're getting what we want, or we're going on Uber picking, we're doing, so we're not being able to have that one-on-one interaction. And I love that you do the brunch and bequest, because I think it allows for people, because you're sharing that story together. I remember just sitting there with someone, okay. And they were asking me, what's your mom like? Really? I was like, if I hadn't have done that, it could have been a nightmare in my life. And having to go through with a mom who had a paid off house, right? So knowing that she did not want that burden on us, right? So knowing that and understanding that and doing all you can to do this. So really think about that. As you guys, this is an episode that I think you should pin. I say pin, save, download, and just hold on to it, because it's just that place of education that, because it's unfamiliar, you need to just hold on to it. Share it with a friend. And one of the things that we have been doing, we did it for Black History Month, but I'm pushing for Women's History Month, is that we have a text number, 312-300-1300, and your keyword is hosting. So that's hosting. Host a party at your house. And share this episode. So allow your family, your friends to listen to this episode. This is how we can softly talk about things that are difficult, that are hard, to really get everybody together to buy into it, that you can all put it on that smart TV.
Yes.
You can cast it, whatever, on a Nest. For those that have Nest for your ADT and seeing doorbells, you can do all of those things. And you can cast this, and everybody around the table can listen to this episode. I'm not asking you to listen to this for Larvetta. I mean, of course, I appreciate you, but I want you to listen to it because this level of information that we're presenting on the platform of podcast is something that you can take away and you can share, and it can go with you from generations to rooms to rooms. And as I was sitting here, I was like, wouldn't that be cool? Somebody host it, right? Had a small little 4 or 5 people. Let's listen to this episode, and then let's talk about what's going to be our action step. Yes. Are we going to do that? And I just got real coachy with y'all, but because I needed this to happen because we all got to get the elephant out the room.
Yes. And you know what, if I can
yes.
We talked a lot about wills and trusts in the sense of what happens after death. But you just sparked something in me that I wanted to share with your audience about another type of trust that we create for families or for groups of friends. It's called a life insurance trust. And so what we do, and this has been around for ages, famously, I guess they say the Rockefellers did this, but it is, let's say it's a family or a group of friends. We get life insurance policies on everybody, right? Everybody who's living. And as babies are born, we get life insurance policies on them.
That's what the Jews, I'm sorry. They do. Yeah.
I, the attorney, draft up an irrevocable trust that says this trust is created between the Smith family. It will hold the funds paid from these life insurance policies as people die. And it will also hold contributions, so people can contribute to it. And we will keep a ledger of who's contributing and who's putting in. And then if someone wants to go start a business, they can borrow from it. And then as people die, then it gets paid in. As people come in, they come in, we put in, and it becomes a living bank for families or groups of friends. It is a very effective tool.
It is.
It can help you really reach your financial goals, your wealth generation goals in an exponential fashion. And so thank you for saying that, kind of just listening and encouraging people to really listen to this, because if they were to do that, so much of what we do when we're thinking, oh, I've got this big medical situation that happened, where can I go? You should be able to turn to your family and not just, hey, Mom, can I borrow some money? But what if there was a pot of money for us all to pull from and pay back in? And this is where we have to expand our minds, because then the first question I get, well, what if such and such take and they don't pay back or this or that? You know? And it's like, we got to think broader than that. That's where the ledger comes in. So you got to keep a balance of it all. But the point is that we grow best together.
Yeah, we do. That's it. We grow best together. That's it.
Yes.
That is it. And so knowing what you just shared, right? So I'm going to challenge you. 312-300-1300. The key word is hosting. You do this with your family as part of your Women's History Month or whatever you guys want to call it. Then what you're going to do is reach out to Sable Law Group, so that they can give you information if that's what you guys want to do as a family. I think it's an awesome, I must say this, the Jewish community does that. And that's how they've been able to be very wealthy. So I learned that when I lived in New York, like that's what they do. They come together. So whenever someone gets sick, they don't ever have to, they just pull from that. And when I saw
GoFundMe pages,
they don't have to do any of that. So again, this doesn't mean that it was just for them. It was just the information was not. We talk about access. We just hadn't gotten it, right? And so realizing that that's the beauty of this platform. So I challenge you doing something different. I believe in that, and having this discussion and having these conversations that's beyond, I mean, social media is one way. I certainly believe it, but taking this and taking a step and being more social within your families to be able to do that, whether that's something you all decide you're going to do over Thanksgiving break, use that Friday. We have to really be intentional, because it's not something that is innately easy for us to do. So that's the the other part. So a bit, so I'm giving you guys some ideas on what you can do. And guess what? If you do that, we're gonna shout you out on the podcast to let you know that this family from this episode did that. That's impact for us. That's what makes me happy. And so I want to see that, because I do believe that we are trying to build a movement that allows for us to be able to log into platforms and learn about Black businesses and, learn about them. I mean, we have to learn, support, invest, you name it, advocate, collaborate. It doesn't have to be just one way.
Yep.
You know, you could you don't know the company, but you heard about them and you share it with somebody. I don't know them. I've never used them, but I heard about them. That's powerful. Yeah. So understanding that. So now I have to ask you this. Why do Black businesses matter?
Because Black businesses matter because of the heart.
Ooh.
And what I mean by that is innately there is something in us all as humans that when we connect with someone, it's based off of a heartfelt, deeply rooted sensibility that's shared. And although you can get good business and good experiences from establishments that aren't owned by Blacks.
Absolutely.
There is something when a Black business owner is operating from the heart, the product that they provide, the product I provide to clients is intentional. It is cultivated for you, with you in mind, your family in mind. And it can bend to your whims in a way that other businesses simply don't. And we need businesses that aren't just doing DEI because it's fashionable, not just doing Black History or Juneteenth because it's fashionable, but they're doing it 365 because it's what they care about. It's coming from their heart. And that's I when I started my business, I was like, how do I convey that? I used to say, hashtag Sable Law Group, lawyers that give a F. I was like, how do I say that and make it cute? Because that's really what I wanted to say. Because there's so many lawyers that are, when they get a case, and it's all about the numbers. Okay, how much can I extract from this person, this matter? How many motions can I file to kick it out? And for me, that wasn't my thing. I really wanted to know, how can I help people in the most efficient way? Because I know our people don't have the same resources. So I can't even make that a part of my model, nor would I want to. So how do I do them succinctly, tightly, effectively, and keep it moving? And it's from the heart. And I think that's really why Black businesses matter.
And sometimes, right, we've been doing this over 100 episodes, and I'm always like, should we change that question? I just won't, because everyone says something different, which is why we matter, right? We're not the same. And I think that was the whole premise behind it, is that. And anytime, and some people always ask, and I want to clarify this in this age of 2025, that doesn't mean that there are not, non-Black businesses that are not important. Let me be clear, because I work with them and I love them. So here's the difference. They value us, which means that I value them. That's the problem. We haven't been valued. So when you haven't been valued from a cost standpoint, right? From a recognition standpoint, you don't believe you matter. So that's just you're right. So it's never to take them out. It's the question of, right, I've got this company, I've got A company, I've got B company. Oftentimes we have to price higher, and I'm this one is this. We have to price higher because what ends up happening is it's supply and demand. And we have to price, not because we're trying to gouge you. There's more. So they can. There's more resources.
They got more demand.
They got more demand. So that's how it works. And that's where we have to get out of this place that this costs more. But there's parts that heart, what you just said, but you're not going to get the heart. You're going to get the transaction,
that's right.
Sure. But you're not going to get the heart. And I think that when you said that, it made me feel a certain kind of way, because a lot of times we hear that, well, let me tell you something. Black law matters. LGBT, it matters. But the thing that we're saying in here is that we matter because we've been marginalized.
You took the words right.
You know what I mean? It's not because, we've been marginalized. Yes. So when you've been marginalized, you're like, heck, we matter. Right. Like, see me.
Yes, that's right.
You know what I mean?
That's
like,
right.
Don't you see me? Right. I went to school. I got my degree. I did some work. And so realizing that, and I have to remind people, because we've had people that just advocate for Black. There's people that collaborate for us. Mm-hmm. They've been on this show and they've said why Black businesses matter for them.
That's right.
And that's the difference. That's what we have to understand. This isn't to take anybody out of it. It's just so that you can see us and value us. And I don't really talk from that standpoint, but when you said it, because I'm talking to a lawyer in justice who can protect me a little bit.
I got your back.
I felt like I got a little comfortable. I was like, well, I got the former prosecutor up in here, so I think I got it. I think I can feel it, because that's what I think. I was like, I feel a little like, oh, I got a little like when you get an attorney on your team, you like, yeah, I wish you would.
Right.
And she said she started off as a tomboy.
Yes.
Don't play with me.
That's right.
Don't play with me. She got knives in her bag. I'm just saying. What brings you joy?
Oh man. Professionally?
Whatever you like. You can give me professional, give me personal. This is your moment of joy. Because we believe Black joy is a commodity that we don't talk about. So, what
brings me joy are my babies. I have now you trying to make somebody cry. I've got a 3-year-old daughter.
Yes.
And a 4-year-old son.
Yes.
And I will share that I've got 2 babies, my husband and I, but I've been pregnant 7 times.
Wow.
And so I've had a lot of experiences, shall we say, in having babies and having expectations and plans for them, and those plans being thwarted and not realized. And so I know everybody loves their babies, but me especially, because of the challenges that we had. And then once we finally received the grace of God with my son, he was born in 2020. He was born in April. Wow. The world shut down March 1st. Right. So finally I'm able to carry my baby, and I'm like, what is going on? And, and then my daughter was a year later, but they bring me so much joy. They're so perfect for us.
Yes.
They're so innocent, and they're fun and hilarious. And I'm super grateful. Yeah. I wanted to be a mom, and for a while it appeared that it may not be in the cards for me.
But God.
Yeah. And God really, he showed up in a way that
only he shows up.
Yeah. I'm without words when I speak about them, but I'm doing all of this and trying to be more creative in my business so that I can make sure that I'm there for them and still have time to do the business and balance it all and scale up and all those things. But they bring me an immense amount of joy. Sprinkle in my husband too, because he's fantastic, and my family. They bring me a lot of joy. Yeah.
And the reason why we started that question is because we weren't given permission to share our Black joy.
Yeah.
For the things that, as it relates to segregation, as it relates to race, like, we just had to go to work, right? And I had to studied it and said that no one could share their joy because they were afraid that they would take their children or they would take their husbands or they would take that. And so joy was not something that you could celebrate and talk about. And so creating that was that, because Black joy became a luxury. Yeah. And oftentimes, right, we build our businesses to help our families, and that becomes that joy, right? And so it's important. So thank you for sharing that joy. It makes me happy, because Black joy is a commodity. We say that because we hear the downtrodden, we hear the struggle. I remember Katori and I having this conversation years ago, and she was like, "I'm just tired of the struggle bus. I'm just tired. Where's the abundance? Where's the bright vibrance?" And she was right, right? Are we going to keep talking about that story? That's still the story, but there's more. There's just more. We don't have to keep talking. We love roots. Don't get me wrong. Yes. But we don't have to keep opening that up. We don't have to, because there is a story that is a root story that, because of roots, is now this, right? But we tend to open that up and that's how they see us. And so it's important to share that. There you have it, guys. This one, and see, we're talking about Women's History Month, and you our history maker in your own right with your baby, right? Yeah. That's happy. That's a happy Women's History Month.
Yes.
That is for real, because a woman can only tell that story.
Oh my gosh.
And not that dad wouldn't have the same story because he would, but it's a different story, right? Because dad is still part of that journey. His seed is certainly valued there. It's the pressure of the woman and feeling that, am I worthy, is a real thing. And so you sharing that is amazing. This has been awesome, Katrice. This has just been, this right here. Happy Women's History Month, everybody. Do something amazing. Shine light on women. That's who I am to the core. I love to see women win. I love to hear stories where women find joy, and there's something in their business that also connects to it that makes me happy. And guys, let me say this: keep rocking with us. As you all know, we've launched this magazine. It's called BBM Mag, and so the opportunity for the mag was another opportunity for us to be seen. We hear about these stories. It's something about touching a magazine and feeling it and doing this, but you can go to our website and download it and put it in your inbox and just be able to have something in front of you that when somebody doubts the value that we have, that you have something that you can show them that represents that Black businesses do matter. So thank you all for tuning in for another episode of Black Businesses Matter, and I'll see you next week.
The Black Businesses Matter podcast is produced by the L3 Agency, a culturally sensitive influencer, marketing, and communications firm in Chicago, where relationships are our currency, passion is our profit maker, and people are our bottom line. Follow us on Instagram at Black Businesses Matter.